Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Gretchen Rowe, and it's my very great pleasure to welcome you to this episode of the Demme Learning Show. It is my great joy to welcome two of my colleagues and friends, Kathleen Calabrese and Kim Green, today. And we're going to talk about your plan B, what happens after your homeschool life. We have lots of thoughts. We don't have all the answers, but we really do hope that we can generate a conversation that will get you thinking and looking toward creating an enthusiastic second stage in your life. And Kathleen, tell us about you and about being here today.
Thank you, Gretchen. My name is Kathleen. I homeschooled my two boys for 21 years. I actually used Matthew C. the entire time, but I homeschooled them all the way up through graduation. My oldest is 26. My youngest is 18. And in my youngest son's senior year, I started working in customer service at Demme Learning, which I'm still here doing that today.
Hi, my name is Kim, and I've been a homeschool mom. Our journey was a little bit different. We didn't start homeschooling right off from the beginning. My kids did attend public school for a little while and withdrew my son in 6th grade. We homeschooled all the way through the end of high school with him and graduated him. He's now 19 and working full time and kind of being a young adult now. And my youngest is 16. I homeschooled her from 4th grade through 8th grade, and she attended public school for about 1.5 years. And now we're back to homeschooling. So I've kind of seen both sides.
Absolutely. And Kim said to me when we talked about beginning this adventure together, the three of us, she said, I kind of feel like I'm an imposter. And I said, no, you're a real homeschool mom. And as your kids' needs change, so do your plans. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that in some depth today. Ladies, welcome. Again, my name is Gretchen Rowe. My husband and I homeschooled 6 children, 21 years. 4 of them graduated high school. The 5th one was homeschooled to high school and then graduated from a public school. And number 6, the caboose in my train, graduates in 65 days. So it's going to be a change for me as well. And I've had the privilege to talk about this in a couple of different venues this year. And I think this is something we don't often talk about because we're so busy in the process of educating our children that we forget that we'll have a life after their education is complete. So I have lots of things to ask of these lovely ladies today, but I want to make sure that we begin with the most important thing, which is, Kathleen, did you think in the middle of your homeschooling journey about its end?
No. Except my boys also are 8 years apart. So when I got into it, I felt like I was, I didn't think about it ending, even though we did take 1 year at a time. We always took 1 year at a time. My husband and I always had a discussion. We discussed it with the boys, so we always took it 1 year of what was best for them. But I never thought about it ending, I would say, until my youngest got to, I guess, about 9th grade, 10th grade, and he really wanted to be more independent. And then all of a sudden I said, uh-oh, now what?
Absolutely. And Kim, how was it for you when your daughter said to you, I know what a grieving process it was for me when my 5th child said, I want to go to public high school. How was it for you when your daughter said she wanted to do that?
It was a little difficult to accept, because in my mind, we were in it for the long haul, and I had saved things for my son from homeschooling him for high school, and I had, kind of planned out things ahead of time. But it's, in the end, it's the same as Kathleen. We've always sat down with our children and taken their interests and their, respectfully listening to what their needs are. And it turned out to be a journey that she needed to go on.
And you were that new breed of homeschool mom who was working full time while you were homeschooling. So did it all of a sudden seem like when you weren't homeschooling anymore, there would be abundant amounts of time?
It was definitely less juggling. I've always worked full time. Prior to working to Demme Learning, I ran a home daycare, and I had 8 kids under the age of 5 at all times. So it was always a juggle. And so there was that little bit of, wow, I'm not juggling so much, and I could devote more time to things. So yeah.
Absolutely. And one of the things, ladies, I'd like to talk about, because I know our personalities since we've had the opportunity to work together for a number of years, the difference between viewing the end of this journey as an introvert and viewing it as an extrovert. So how did you all look at the end of the journey from an introvert's perspective? Kathleen?
Right. So I am definitely an introvert. I guess that for me, it was discovering my identity, because for 25 years, I was home with my kids. I didn't work. I was just home with them. And I was the homeschool teacher. That's who I was. So I think when that realization came in that, you're more, for me, it was definitely, you're more than just a homeschool mom. I still could identify as that, but it came that I realized I'm more than that. So then it was about figuring out, well, who else am I? What else am I? And then trying to figure out where to go from there.
And were you intentional about figuring that out, or were you just pondering that?
Praying. Honestly, for me, it was praying. I had no idea. As I said, I wasn't thinking and prepping for the end of homeschooling. So when it just kind of hit me, when my son got to 10th grade and he was, Mom, can I just take my books in my room? Can I just do it myself? And all of a sudden I found myself literally standing in the homeschool room going, okay, now what? And honestly, it was just a lot of thinking about it and praying and saying, well, what do I do next? It really kind of hit me hard because I wasn't prepped for it. I still thought I had a few more years. And then all of a sudden it came on me. So I just was wondering, what do I do next?
And how about you, Kim? I know that you are, you tend toward more of that introversion. Does that also mean introspection as well?
Definitely. It's kind of the same as Kathleen. It hit me before I knew it. Because for me, I knew my son's journey was coming to an end, but I thought I still had 4 more years with my daughter. And then all of a sudden that decision changed. And I was like, oh, wow, now what? So it was a lot of introspection and just trying to, what do I want? What are my passions? Rediscovering some of my passions. Like I said before, when we talked, earlier, I've never read so many books. I finally have time to sit down as an introvert. That's one of my favorite hobbies, is to sit and read books. And I have time in the evenings because juggling full-time work plus homeschooling meant that we did a lot of things in the evenings, or, different times of day. And just to have that free time and to discover passions that I used to have before my role as a homeschool mom.
Right. And, as an extrovert, I'm also an external processor. And sometimes when we process our conversations, I'll have a conversation with someone and I am deep in the midst of thinking about what I'm talking about while I'm having that conversation. And then later I will sit down maybe with a journal, with a piece of paper, and I'll write some things down from that or something like that. But I tend to ask other people so often, what do you think? Did you guys do that? Was that part of the conversation for you all, or being more introverted, would that have been a difficult thing for you to have as a conversation?
Definitely difficult. I don't think I asked anybody else other than my husband. And of course, he gave me that wonderful supportive answer of whatever you want to do, honey, which didn't help because I didn't know what was next. I didn't know what I should do next. But I did not reach out to other people and ask, what do you think I should do? What am I good at?
And I will tell you honestly, when my homeschool journey ended, I needed a 12-step program to walk it back because I had no idea how on earth I was going to not be a homeschool mom. It just seemed like it had been my identity for so many years. And, as women, we tend to identify ourselves so easily with that journey that it's sometimes hard to revisit that again. So Kim, take us through your thought process, because there are parents who are listening to us whose kids have said to them, I want to go to school. How was that conversation in your household, and how did you entertain that?
I think most of the conversations happened with myself, just because being the introvert, you don't reach out a lot. But my husband and I had a lot of conversations, having to let go of a lot of the preconceived fears and making sure that I wasn't pushing my fears onto her, going, back into the public school system. I'm a former public school teacher, so I know what some of the things can be like within those walls. And in today's age and society, there's things that you worry about. So just making sure that we were staying positive, and having conversations with her so that she was as prepared in a positive way.
And Kathleen, tell me a little bit about the transition for you with with your first graduate. Did you think, okay, how is this going to change when he's no longer at home with me? Was that an intentional conversation, or was that just something that sort of evolved?
I would say it's more that it sort of evolved. My oldest son chose not to go to college. So it was, I guess more of a conversation between my husband and myself and him of, okay, then what are you going to do? And it was, coming to that realization that, he had to find out for himself, okay, I don't want the college option, but what do I want to do? And his was that he wanted to go in the workforce. He wasn't even sure what he wanted to do. So we just had to, talk with him about what do you like and what do what are the things that you're good at? And he kind of went from there. And, it's working out. He's still living at home with us at 26, but he works 2 jobs and he saves almost every single dollar that he makes. So he's close now at the point that he can go buy his own house, which is phenomenal. It's what he was working towards. It's what he said to us at 18 that he wanted to work towards. He wanted to be able to buy his own house and not be in debt, and he's done it. So it worked out well, but it was just having that conversation with him of, what are the next steps?
Right. And the reason I wanted you to say that is because we have this conversation as an afterthought almost with our children. We expect that this conversation will eventually come, but we don't have that conversation with ourselves. And that is huge. And it makes an enormous amount of difference as to how we relate to what happens next. I know for a number of years, I had no hobbies. I had no life extant from the homeschooling journey and then the business that I ran, and they kept me up to my eyeballs. But I needed to figure out what filled me. And I think that's a question that is really important for us to be able to ask. What fills you? So tell us, Kim, in your reading, was that fiction reading, or was it reading things that would be self-improvement, or what did that look like for you in that process?
For me, it was a mix of all of those things, and just making sure that I was taking time for myself. So some of my books were just fun fictional. I like historical fiction, so I've delved into some of those. And both my kids like history, so we could have conversations about things. If I could catch them walking through the living room and not in their rooms or heading off to work or things like that. But yeah, I mean, it's just things that I was interested in, and it changed from day to day. In the beginning, I definitely read some things that were helpful for me, for finding purpose and things like that. And then I was like, you know what? Maybe I don't need to have like a super purpose. Maybe it's just time to take time for myself.
Absolutely. And Kathleen, you had mentioned as we were preparing today about talking to our kids about, not our kids, talking to ourselves about the 5 stages that we would go through. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So the stages for, ending your homeschooling would be transition, letting go, learning a new way, loss, and gain. So for me, transition was the realization that my homeschool time was coming to an end, and that it was time to, look at something else. Letting go, of course, meant for me, again, my son was telling me, Mom, I want to be independent. And I had to respect that, even though there was part of me that wanted to pull him into the schoolroom and sit next to him and continue to read books to him. I knew that it was right that I had to let him go. He probably could have gone earlier, but it was time. So I had to just tell myself, even though I wanted to continue to be that homeschool mom, it was time to let him go. Learning a new way was finding, what am I going to do next? What is it going to be? And loss, actually, you grieve when you're done. I homeschooled for 21 years. I definitely grieved, even after I started working here. And, I went to work full time, and my son was still, homeschooling in his room. I still grieved. I still felt like, I can't believe I'm not doing that anymore. I can't believe that's not who I am anymore. So it took a little while of that. But then the final stage is gain, where then I started to see, okay, I was a homeschooling mom for 21 years, and that's great. And, I did it. But now there's more to me. Now I was discovering that, I had hobbies, I had interests, I could do more. I really kind of expanded myself. And eventually I got over the grieving, and I started to realize how much more now, because of time, how much more now I can do and I'm capable of doing.
Right. And Kim, we had talked about this when we met last week in preparation for this conversation. You talked about remembering that it's a season and shifting your focus to the positive. And you said something that I thought was really important. So I want to revisit what you said, and don't panic. What you said was, in the process of shifting your focus to the positive, you really have to be intentional. And you said you even had to correct what you said to yourself so that you kept it in the positive. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
I mean, it is, like Kathleen said, it is a period of loss in some ways, where you feel it's so different. It's just not your normal. Now it's a new routine. I mean, even like the daily routine changes for things. And just in keeping that in perspective, it's really easy to go down that rabbit hole of, oh my gosh, this is terrible. Nothing's ever going to be the same. But I also looked at it, it is a different season. It is a different time for us. And it was an opportunity. It was an opportunity to find new ways to connect with my kids. So it might not look the same, but you're still their parent. You're still having that relationship with them. It's just finding new ways to connect with them. It might not be the same as when you were cuddled up on the sofa reading a book together, or, going outside and going on a nature walk when they were younger. But there's definitely different ways to connect with them. My oldest is 19, he works full time. And, he comes in the door from a day at work, and, we chat about how his day was at work, or he's got friends that live overseas, and, his goal is to save up money to go over there and, travel a bit abroad. So we talk about those things. Taking interest in whatever your kids' interests are in that season helps to keep that connection, even though it doesn't look exactly the same as what it was when they were homeschooling with you.
Right. So I'm going to put forth, as we step into the first 20 minutes here, I'm going to put forth a thought process for moms who might find themselves in this transition stage. And that is, you did an enormous amount of research every year that you educated your children. I don't think either one of you just went, well, we're starting school tomorrow. Wonder what we're going to do, right? We have to bring that same degree of intentionality to, what are we going to do after our homeschool journey? And a lot of us don't take the time to pause to think about that until this period of time is upon us. So as an exercise, I would love for those who are watching us live today and those who are going to view this at a later point in time to sit down and think about, what are the things that I did? What am I really good at? One of you talked about thinking about, what are the things that I'm good at? And I think it was you, Kathleen, in defining not necessarily what that means, but defining what you did well. You said you ran a co-op at one point in time. And so can you detail that a little bit more? Because I like some parents who are sitting here like deer in the headlights in a panic going, I don't know what I do well. To hear your list of the things you evaluated yourself for so that they can start thinking toward that.
Sure. And that's absolutely how I felt, that I don't know what I do well. And I realized you just pointed to it really, because I focus on my children. And as moms, many times we just do that. We absorb ourselves into our kids. I was concerned for a long time about what they were going to do after high school. And as I said, it hit me like a brick wall that I wasn't thinking, well, what about me? What do I do after homeschooling is done? I just kept focusing my attention on them. So when it came time and my husband said to me, well, what do you want to do? What are you good at? My initial thought was, I don't know. I don't know what I'm, I'm a homeschool mom. That's what I'm good at. I don't know. So I did have to start really thinking about where are my strengths. And again, because I'm an introvert, I didn't ask other people. It would be great to, say to somebody, what do you see as my strengths? Where do you see my strong points? Because other people see us sometimes better than we do. But I didn't ask. So I had to think about what I was good at. And I started, just kind of thinking back, well, what have I done over the years? And I was in leadership in a homeschool co-op. I helped my husband run a very big soccer league in the town. And that helped me to realize that customer service was something that I was suited for, that I liked to talk to people. I liked to have somebody approach me with, I have this situation or I have this problem. How can you help? And then be able to direct them. So it did kind of help me to see that that was something that that I felt like I could do, because I felt like I was equipped for it. So when I saw the social media post that Demme Learning was hiring, I looked at it and my first thought was I could do that, because I knew it, it made me feel like I was equipped for it, because I had already been thinking about where my strengths were.
Absolutely. How about you, Kim? How did that play for you? How did
A
you
little
find
bit-
your way to us, I guess, is a good question.
Actually, I was using Math UC and Spelling UC with both my kids. And I went to order the next level of Spelling UC and saw that you were hiring. And I was like, oh, I'll just give this a try. And here I am. I started here in 2017. But for me, and I feel like this is going to happen for me in life in two phases. I kind of get a do-over now that my daughter's returning to homeschooling. So it's kind of exciting for me because I didn't take that time to, think about what my journey is going to be like afterwards. So for me, I already had the career in place. I've always been working full time. I didn't need that component in my life, but it has allowed me to spend more time and more devotion to what I do. So in that part, that's been helpful. But for me, it was more of just considering what are the things that I like on the outside of work. I've had more time with my husband. We go out, especially now that the kids are older. We go on dates. We go on more dates now after 20 some years of marriage than we did, back before kids sometimes, because we have that freedom and we have that time to do it now. I get to have more time. I took up yoga. I like to read books. I like to sit out on my lanai with a cup of tea and talk to my mom. I have more freedom and more time for those things. The career part was already there though, so I didn't have to thankfully look for something new in that area.
Right. And, Kathleen said something really valuable. Did you guys homeschool all by yourselves, or were there people that you collaborated with as you made your journey, right? I think we all did in some ways or another. Kathleen, you collaborated with people in the co-op. Sometimes it takes a bit of courage to say to someone, particularly if you do tend to be more introverted, what do you see as my strengths? It might surprise you. I think Kathleen had said last week when we talked that she ran this giant soccer league, didn't think twice about it, and then went, oh, wait, that's an enormous amount of organizational skill. And so I think if we begin to quantify what we're good at in our homeschooling journey, then it's easier for us to step back and look at that alongside another journey. And I think that becomes a little bit easier. Ladies, we have so many questions today. We had so many registrants who asked some terrific questions. So I want to share some of these questions with you all because I think you have a degree of wisdom that will be helpful to these parents. And the first one is, someone said to us, looking for prep after 25 years of homeschooling. If you were at the end of that 25-year journey, and I am at the end of 30 years of journey, what are maybe some 2 or 3 questions you would start asking yourself? Just some generalities, and I'll ask that of both of you.
For me, I would approach it. There was always prep for homeschooling. Every time we started a new school year, there was so much preparation that went into it. I would suggest break it down. Like I would break it down to, what are we going to do for math next year? What are we going to do for language arts? What are we going to do for social studies, science? Break it down into different areas of your life. What is it that you want to do as far as hobbies? What is it that you want to do as far as free time, as far as work, meaningful things? What is your purpose? Just kind of asking yourself, but break it down into manageable pieces, kind of like you would break it down and do that planning for your next homeschool year. Plan for yourself.
I think I like the way that you said that, break it down into manageable pieces and sort of look at it as topics instead of all of it all at once, to look at one thing at a time. How about you, Kathleen? What can you add to that?
Yeah, I would say the same. And for me, there was even an added. We were a one income family for the entire time, for 25 years, from the time I stopped working literally 2 days before I had my son, my oldest son, and we were a one income family that whole time. So when I finished homeschooling, and then when I took a full-time job, all of a sudden we had some money. So it was even more for us and for me, where then it started to be, well, not to spend money, go out and buy things, well, but what are the things that you're interested in? What are the things that you would have liked to have done had you had the time or the money to be able to go out? So then I was able to purchase some books that I wanted, or some art supplies to paint, or just different things that then I didn't feel so constricted. So it kind of even gave me more choices of of thinking about what I wanted to do, what I was interested in.
Right. This next question, I think it spoke to my heart because what this mom said is true for so many of us. She said, I'm looking to help my heart transition from homeschooling full-time to putting my efforts into other endeavors. And I'm putting 3 of my 4 kids into private school next year. And so she's looking to find a way to not be heart sore about that process. So Kim, can you talk a little bit, since Kathleen never had to go through that process that you and I had to endure of letting go because our kids wanted something different. Can you talk a little bit about how you protected your heart in that part of the journey?
Definitely. It's okay. It's okay to sit and be sorrowful for a little while, and to find peace with it. It takes a while to find peace with it because you may have one intention and your child has a different intention. But just to remind yourself that it's their journey, it's their lesson to learn in life, it's their perspective, to experience things maybe differently than you intended for them to experience. But it's okay to allow yourself to grieve a little bit. But I would limit it to not getting too far into it and allowing yourself to just keep in that perspective. Take time, shift your perspective, shift it to the positive. What are the good things that could come out of this? But not only for you, but for your kids. When my daughter went back to the public school system, she was around people and had classes and experiences that I couldn't have given her. That, she may have gotten out of a co-op, but we didn't have a lot of co-ops near us. And with working full time, it's difficult to get to those things. But she, different classes, she had different camaraderie with, connections with different classmates, with different teachers. The hardest thing for her to decide when she decided to actually leave was saying goodbye to some of the teachers. because she had quite a few teachers that really cared about her. And I think it's important for your kids to make connections outside of just your immediate family too. So yeah, I mean, let yourself sit with it for a little while, but not too long, not too long. And then, just make sure that you keep that perspective, looking towards the future and finding the good.
Absolutely. And I love what you said as far as sit with it, because I think we do need to allow ourselves to walk through the process of grieving the end of one phase of our life and the beginning of another. Kathleen, can you talk a little bit about suggestions maybe for a parent who is trying to figure out, her last one is graduating, and she's looking toward, what do I do now? And we've talked a great deal about this. What would you suggest that she start looking for interests first, or looking for work interests first? I guess my question is twofold. Do you look to fill the personal cup, or do you look to fill a professional cup first? What would be your opinion there?
Yeah, I think you want a personal first, because hopefully that will lead you to then, if you're looking to go out and get employment, it'll lead to that. Personal first is good because you realize, you start thinking about what you're interested in. So I know one of the things for me, before I had my oldest son, I worked in a daycare center. I was a preschool teacher. I worked at the preschool level, but there was times that I also worked in the infant room. I worked at different levels. So at the end of my homeschool journey, I was trying to figure out, who am I? What do I want to do? And I did think, well, do I go back and work in the daycare center? I volunteered at my church to serve during service. And I went in the baby room, and I love babies, and I wish that I had more than 2 kids. But I quickly realized, nope, I am not at this season anymore. Me and having 6 babies and, crying and diapers. And I thought, okay. So I was able to see from there that going back to work in a daycare center, that was a part of my life that I did at one point, but now it wasn't something that gave me joy. So I thought, okay, so I was now able to determine that's not the direction that I want to go. So, I think volunteering is a good way, finding, starting a hobby to see, do I like art? What kind of things do I like that I always felt like for years I just didn't have the opportunity to do? So just taking that little bit of time to figure out, what are the things that I like? What are the things that I want to do? And then I think that eventually that will lead you into something I could make a career out of, my interests.
Absolutely. Kim, with Andrew, I know that the transition for him when he graduated was gentle, because it was an easy thing for him to step into adulthood, because he kind of is that kid who's an adult, even though he wasn't yet by the calendar. What was it like for you personally as a mom to sort of say, okay, now, Andrew, you're on your own here? Was that an easy process? Was that an intentional process? Or was it just all of a sudden one day he was there full blown standing in front of you as now an adult man?
Yeah, he's always been my very advanced old man in a young body. And the transition for him was a little bit easier. My last year of homeschooling him was 11th grade, because 12th grade, he did all dual enrollment at the college. And it was very intentional for me to allow him that space. And I'll be honest, probably for the first 6 months, because he was also a new driver, I would be on Find My on my phone. Did he make it there? And even going to work, I'm like, okay. And at one point I was like, you have to stop. You have to stop. You have to trust that, he's safe. He's going to be okay. He's very wise. He's making good decisions. So it was very intentional to do that step back, and not easy.
No, it really isn't easy. And if you have more than one child, Kathleen, I know that your boys are wildly different in the way that they approach life. You have to learn to adapt. And sometimes in that adaptation, it's kind of a little bit on the crazy side. How was the adaptation different, oldest son and youngest son, for you, Kathleen?
Well, both of my boys are introverts, kind of. I guess they're a mix. My oldest is very much an introvert. So the high school years, even at home, he was very quiet. It's just the way he is. He's more of a person who's sitting in their own listening, but not talking, not very verbal. And after homeschooling, the transition for us was all of a sudden he got an interest in politics. I have never had an interest in politics. I've never liked it. I've never wanted to watch the news, none of it. So that was actually something that I realized since we were transitioning to more of a friend now relationship, because he's an adult and I had to transition. I had to actually start getting an interest myself in politics, because I realized I wanted to be able to have conversations with him. He was very interested in it. It was right around an election, and he really just kind of went crazy and dove into it and just wanted to talk about it all the time. And all of a sudden I was realizing that our relationship changed, because now I was having adult conversation with him. And for the first time, what I saw was he was okay having an opinion that was different than mine. And he would fight his corner, and he would, have information to back up why he had that opinion. And that was an interesting transition, that it wasn't any more of, well, if mom or dad said it, then that's what I have to believe. He was on his own, realizing that he had his own opinions, and he was allowed to have his own opinions that were different than ours. So that was a really nice transition. And the thing that has helped me with now is my 18-year-old is now, he's definitely in the stage of, he's discovering that he has his own opinions and they're not the same as ours, but he's not willing to speak about it yet. So he's actually gotten quieter recently. And we know, because we've gone through this with our older son, we know what's going on, that he is trying to figure out how to voice his opinion that may be different than ours. So we just encourage him and just let him know, you can speak to us about anything, and it doesn't even have to be the same thing that we think. We want to hear your opinion. And hopefully we're getting there a little bit with him. But having my older son go through it, it helped me to see it with my younger son, and to see that I feel like you go through, as a homeschool parent, you go through 4 stages with your kids, where you're the caretaker, you're the teacher, you're their mentor, and then you're their friend. So right now I'm friend with my oldest son, but I'm still mentor for my youngest son. So even that is interesting.
I like the way that you describe that, Kathleen. I think that makes a tremendous amount of difference if we can frame that differently. And, most of us remember what to expect in the first year of life. There is no book out there that says, what do you expect in adulthood? And I think it's much harder to parent adult children than it is to parent kids who are still under your roof and subject to your, as my soon-to-be 18-year-old says, potential edict. And I asked him if he would define that for me one day. I'm like, what does that mean when you say, well, your potential edict? And he said, I'm at the stage where I am beginning to choose things that don't necessarily line up with you. And I laughed, because this kid is even a little bit to the left of me as far as extrovert is concerned. He's the extrovert's extrovert. And I got tickled with that, because I saw myself as parenting him. He saw me as giving him guidance, and now it was up to him to decide what guidance he wanted and what opinions he would make of his own. And that was a different thing than being a child in our household. And that was the most fascinating conversation. And if you haven't had that conversation with your kids, I'd encourage you to start gently, because they may say some things that are really different from what you expect them to say. And you know, that wonderful book, We All Believe, I believe that even if your kids make decisions that don't line up with what you believe, it's your job to love them anyway. And that's not an easy thing to do, especially because there's no book for us to go to. How do I answer my adult child on this? One of the things I think I would like to talk about and then I'll go back to these questions, is having someone to bounce ideas off of that's not necessarily your husband. And Kathleen, you have said, that your husband was the touch point for you. My husband is the king of the fix-its. And it's taken me 10 years to teach him to say, is this just a listening conversation? Or are you looking for a solution here? And that's something we also have to learn to say to our kids as well. So Kim, is that your husband, or was there someone, maybe it's your mom, that you could say, hey, here are the things I'm thinking about, and what do you think of this?
Besides my husband, definitely my mom. She's always been a good sounding board, and she's always been very good at, here's advice or here's not so much advice, here's my thought, and you can do with it what you want, which is always good because I don't feel like it's imposing, and she knows sometimes I might listen to it and sometimes I might not. Not a lot has changed since I was a teenager in that way. But, I would bounce things off of her, and she would just say, okay, well, what about this? And I would say, oh, okay, I hadn't thought of it from that perspective. And then aside from that, I've always been a part of a couple of local homeschool groups. And they're all on Facebook. And so being the introvert that I am, we go out to events and stuff like that. But in between, you can bounce ideas off of them and get some different perspectives that way too. But as far as closeness, definitely my husband and my mom.
Absolutely. And I was blessed to homeschool alongside two other friends that we had kids of the same age. So we were pretty much in the same portions of the journey. And it was easy for me to ask my friends questions that my husband might have felt anxious about my asking questions, because he wanted me to be happy. He wanted me to feel provided for. And, there's situations where you're making this journey solo and you don't have a partner or a spouse, a husband or a wife. So in that context, it's even more important for us to find that friend who can be a sounding board and listen to you, but not necessarily provide all the answers. I think that makes a tremendous amount of difference. Ideas, ladies, what kinds of things would you, several of our registrants said, I just don't know what kind of ideas I should have. I don't know what I should be thinking. We've talked about that, about looking for your strengths and those kinds of things. But if we were going to go outside of our circle of influence and do some research, where are some things that you think you might be able to go? And I know, Kim, we laughed in the meeting we were in this morning. Mother Google knows all. She can tell us anything. But what are some ideas, some practical ideas we can give to our listeners to go research things that they could be doing?
Browse the library aisles. I don't know. I'm a big book person. But you can go down the library aisles and find so many different things that you may not even thought that you were interested in. And just look at your everyday, like Kathleen had said earlier. What are the things that I enjoy doing? What are the things that I'm skilled at doing? That don't require too much distancing yourself from where you already are. Take a walk and just think about yourself and what you enjoy and what you like doing. If you like volunteering at different places, things like that, you'll have more time for those things. But just kind of ask yourself those kind of questions. You can certainly ask your friends for their perspective too. But just taking time to settle with yourself and think about, what are the things I enjoy? What are the things I'm passionate about? And what are the things that I'm skilled at? And it might be something super minor, like Kathleen, not even thinking that she was great at organizing. She's one of our most organized customer service reps, and we are so grateful for her. And maybe that came out of her leading a baseball league, but it's a skill set that she could take elsewhere. So, think of those things that you might not even cross your mind that you might be good at without even realizing it.
And we are talking in small increments here. That's the impression we've given you, but maybe your change will be a huge one. I'll tell you all a story of a homeschool mom. I know she hasn't quite finished her journey. In fact, she still has 4 homeschooled children at home, but she decided she wanted to become a lawyer. So alongside her children, she is now a full-time student. She's in her first year of law school and adjudicating herself equitably. She's doing a great job. But in that capacity, this was something that she really wanted to do. And she didn't want to wait until her kids were out from under her home to do it. And so if there's a passion in your heart, there's no need to wait until you're done the homeschooling journey to begin that process. I talked with a mom at a conference 2 weeks ago who had always wanted to be a nurse, but became a mom before she got her college degree. And when her kids hit high school, she decided to go back and finish her RN. And when I talked to her a year ago at this conference, she was about to be pinned, finally to become an RN. And when I saw her this year, I said, "How's it going?" And she said, "Oh, I'm finishing a master's degree program." She said, "I'll be done in December." And her last child graduates this spring. So you don't necessarily have to wait until the journey's done to find something different to do. And I think that makes a huge difference. Let me see, ladies, with these questions. How do you deal with the letdown? I think that's a good question to ask because all of us know what that feels like. What are the emotions that we should be looking for so that we can manage? Kathleen, what were some of the emotions that you had that involved that grief process that you talked about, about that letting go process that you had to sort of examine and become comfortable with?
For me, it was understanding that I was still their parent. So I still, they still needed me. I guess it was that of feeling, do they still need me? Because I put my worth in my homeschooling. So then it was, do they still need me? And then I realized they do still need me. They need me to make our house a home so that it's a comfortable place for them to live. They need me to make our house comfortable so that they can bring friends over. Those were some of the things, that's something that they needed from me. They needed to be able to have conversations with me. So it was just that realizing that I still was very much needed by them. It just was going to look differently now. So there is that, as Kim said earlier, there's that process of grieving because you identify as a homeschool mom for so long, but you can't stay in that too long. You have to realize I'm going into a different season now, and how, what kind of parent am I now to these children? How is it going to be different? And you do have to transition to seeing the positive in it so that you can get out of the grieving of I'm no longer a homeschool mom to now you realize, wow, my son wants to come home from work and talk to me. And I love that. That's amazing. And, and appreciate it and look forward to it and be grateful for that, and other things I do for my other son, just to shift that focus, to be grateful of what I do have, with him. My youngest son is going to college. And even though he has a driver's license, just due to the traffic in our area, we've been driving him back and forth. And I don't look at the car ride as daunting. I look at it that I'm grateful that I have that time alone in the car with him. So, I purposefully shifted my focus to being grateful for the new relationship that I have with them. And that helped me to get over grieving of I'm no longer a homeschool mom.
Kim, I want to ask you a question because you're in a unique situation here. You finished the journey and now the journey's begun again. How are you going to look at the end of this journey differently, having gone through it once and thought you were done, and then your daughter made a different decision?
The journey itself is going to be different. And part of that is because I went through that first journey of I'm done. And I did get to discover things that I enjoyed and time for myself and time with my husband and her independence. And that's something that she values. So the rest of our homeschooling journey, now that we've jumped back into it, it will look a little bit different. She's going to do some things online that, she can be taught better than I can teach her. She wants to take American Sign Language. That's not something that I feel competent enough to, teach with her, but it's also something I might try and learn alongside with her. But she's going to take that online. So our journey is going to look a little bit different than what it used to. And that's because she wants it to look different. She values her independence. And I've also really enjoyed, not having so much, on my plate. And that still gives me time and, allows me to be able to do certain things that I've enjoyed too. So I think it's going to be more balanced this time. But it also gives me a couple of years now. We've got 2 more years left for her for high school that I can look into. Okay, well, now I get to go through this journey again. And I don't think it's going to be as sad as it was the first time. Because I've been through it, I've learned from it. And it's just a different perspective. And if you keep putting that positive spin on it, not everything's positive in life, but sometimes you just have to shift that perspective and find the best in things,
I love the way that you said that, because it gives you the opportunity now to view that cup as half full. And I think that makes a huge difference. I can't believe we are coming up to the top of the hour here. And so I want to ask both of you, what are the thoughts that you would have in closing? What are the takeaways you would like each of our listeners to take away from this conversation today? What would you suggest to them to go out and start doing? Kim, I'll start with you.
Step 1, I would say give yourself some grace, give yourself some time, some acceptance, and then also just kind of, look at yourself. What do you want to do? What are your hobbies? What are your thoughts? Spend some time on you. Your focus for so long has been on this role of being a homeschool mom, and it's encompassed so much of what you are, and that's not a bad thing. But it's now time to focus and spend that time and that introspection on yourself. And, what is it you want to learn? Like you planned out things for your child for homeschooling, plan out things for yourself that you might want to take up. It could be something as simple as painting. It could be volunteering. It could be whatever your passions are. And then as far as your connection with your kids, someone very wise once told me, meet them where they are. And we've talked a little bit about that. But it's find those different ways to connect with your kids. My oldest, he'll come in and chat about his school day or his work day, now that it's a work day. But he's also super into Star Wars. We sat last night and watched Mandalorian. It's not my top favorite shows. I probably could have picked 10 other shows I would have preferred to watch. But at 19, he wants to sit on the sofa and watch Mandalorian. By golly, I'm going to do it. Like that's where we connect. My daughter likes to go thrift shopping. Yep, let's go. Let's get in the car. Let's go do it, because it's time with them and it's finding different ways to connect with them and meeting them where they are.
I have watched more things in the last 10 years that I had absolutely zero interest in, but my kids had an interest in it. So I thought, all right, I'm going to enter into this space. There are times when I thought, this is an hour of my life I'm never going to get back. But I do think that there's that opportunity to see the world through their eyes when you get to do those kinds of things. So it does make a difference. Kathleen, how about you?
The same. I think, again, look at what your interests are. And when you're able to, focus on the positives and focus on the good that's going to come out of it. Kim mentioned about going on dates with her husband. I was going to say that's something that I wasn't even expecting, but my relationship with my husband has strengthened so much because what I realized was we were kind of parenting, walking side by side for so many years. There was all those days where you're just trying to make it through to the day, make it through to bath time and bedtime. And, when they're little that you're just, let me just make it through the day. but we were side by side for so many years that it did get to the point where we were able to kind of just stop and look at each other and look into each other's eyes and just realize, okay, the kids are not my entire focus anymore. And now, and then I realized that I could actually, give more time to my husband, and he realized, as well, that I was available. So we definitely strengthened our relationship. The other thing I was going to say is, when I was thinking about all the different things of what am I going to do now? I'm not a homeschool mom anymore. And I really felt in my heart, but I want to keep homeschooling. I want to keep homeschooling. Why don't I have more kids? Why does it have to be? I want to keep homeschooling. And it was really an aching in my heart that I wanted to keep doing it. And here an avenue opened up for me, because I'm still in the homeschool world. I talk to homeschool customers every day. I help and support them every day. So I was allowed to stay in homeschooling, in something that I really felt when I was, figuring out what to do next, that I really felt like I wanted to stay there. And just to encourage people, there are things in the homeschool world that you could continue to do. In the co-op that I was in, it started out that it was all moms, I'll teach this, I'll teach that, just volunteering. By the end, when I was leaving, there was a lot of paid teachers. It was a lot of, we had a mom who homeschooled her kids. When she was done, she realized that she was really good at teaching writing. Just really, it was her thing. She had no idea, but it was her thing. She came into the co-op and she taught writing, and people paid her to teach writing. And she made a good amount of money. There was other people who came in and taught guitar classes, because that was something. So all of a sudden, people were realizing, and I remember people would say this, I thought I was all done homeschooling, and here I am in a homeschool co-op. And now this is one day a week. And guess what? This other homeschool co-op asked me to go teach there. So that's going to be a second day a week. So there is opportunities out there if you feel like, the homeschooling avenue is still so strong for you that you want to stay there. And whether it's paid or even volunteering. The other thing is, we had a mom who had homeschooled all her kids, and she would come to the co-op every Friday. She was done homeschooling, but she just came to be there to support other moms. And at lunchtime, there would be just a group gathered around her every lunchtime, just wanting to talk to her, just wanting to hear her suggestions. She had all adult children. She even had grandchildren at this point, but moms were looking for that support. They wanted that mentorship. So that was something she was able to provide, where she was still able to support the homeschool community. And it was wonderful.
Absolutely. And if that's where your heart is, and that's where you find your joy, we want to encourage you to continue to head that direction, because boy, I tell you what, there are more moms who feel like they're rowing the boat all by themselves than ever before. And knowing an experienced homeschool mom would be willing to come alongside them is just invaluable gold. So if you see yourself in that role, we want to encourage you to stay in that role, because it makes a difference. Thank you both for joining me today. Thank you for this insightful discussion into your own journeys. And hopefully parents can see themselves in this story that we've told, the story we've woven today for those who will come behind us as they end their journeys. Hopefully they will end with a flourish and well. This is Gretchen Rowe for the Demme Learning Show. Thanks so much for joining us. You can access the show notes or watch the recording at demmelearning.com/show or on our YouTube channel. Be sure to rate, review, follow, or subscribe wherever you may be hearing this, especially if you really enjoyed it. Thanks for joining us today, everyone. Have a wonderful day.